It all started with the sound of sneakers on pavement and bass in her ears. Ayanna James was just walking home. Hoodie up, backpack slung low, 14 years old and tired from a long day at school in a sleepy suburb just outside D.C. But in America, black girls don't always get to just be tired. Especially not when two over-caffeinated patrol cops, bored and bloated off ego, think they've found the next headline. Suspicious activity, they say into the radio. But what they really mean is black girl alone. Ayanna didn't even notice the cruiser roll up behind her until one yelled, "Hey!" and she pulled her headphones down just in time for a hand to grab her arm. Confused, scared, and still not sure this was real life, she stammered, I'm just going home." Didn't matter. She was spun around and shoved against the hood of the squad car. Cold metal kissed her cheek. Her backpack hit the ground. One hand yanked behind her back, then the other. Click, click. The cuffs bit hard. She didn't resist, but her voice cracked as she repeated, "My name's Ayanna James. I haven't done anything." They didn't care, never even asked. But the neighborhood watched. A retired teacher stood behind her gate, phone out, mouth open. A guy jogging past stopped and fumbled for his camera app. A mother with her toddler in tow froze at the corner. "What did she do?" someone asked. "She looks like a kid," another said. But the cops didn't blink. They just stood there with smug satisfaction like they'd just bagged a real threat. Then came the screech. A black SUV tore around the bend like it was late to war. It stopped with surgical precision inches from the cruiser. Doors popped. Two men in black suits stepped out first, eyes scanning the scene like heat-seeking missiles. The one in the middle didn't rush. He emerged slow, deliberate. Tall, dark skin, perfect fade. Charcoal gray suit cut so sharp it could have sliced air. He looked like power. He looked like Judgment Day. One of the cops started toward him, chest puffed. "Sir, this is a police." But then the man spoke. "Let her go," he said, calm, controlled, lethal. The cops blinked, confused. "She was detained under suspicion." "She is Ayanna James," the man cut in. "She is 14. She is walking home. She is not a threat, and she is my daughter." Everything stopped. You could hear the wind gasp. The man pulled a badge from his inside pocket and flipped it open with the kind of quiet authority that made everyone's stomach drop. "Malcolm James, Attorney General of the United States. You just made the worst mistake of your career." The suits flanked him like a presidential formation. One was already making calls. The other was filming. And the cops? Their mouths moved, but no words came. One's hand twitched near his holster, but he caught himself. Barely. Ayanna stood frozen, still cuffed, eyes wide. Tears just beginning to break free from the corners. When she saw her dad, she didn't say anything. She just broke. Because no kid should have to feel that kind of fear in their own zip code. No kid should have to be rescued from people who wear badges. Malcolm didn't touch her, not yet. He just nodded once to one of the agents. "Uncuff her." Hands shook as the cop obeyed. The cuffs clicked open with a sound that felt like thunder now. Ayanna rubbed her wrists. The metal had already left red marks. Malcolm finally looked at the officers. Really looked. His gaze wasn't rage, it was colder. Calculated. The kind of look that said, "I already own the next 20 steps and you're still on the first one." Then he pulled out his phone, not to call, to record. "I want your badge numbers, names, department. And I want you to know that everything you just did, every second of it, is on at least 6 cell phones and counting, including mine." One of the cops stammered something about misunderstanding, but no one was listening anymore. Because karma just pulled up in a black SUV. And now it wasn't a routine stop. It was a federal case in the making. And those two officers? They didn't just cuff a child. They woke up the devil in a suit. It took exactly 4 seconds for everything to start crumbling. One of the officers, the taller one, Officer Hale, decided he still had some grip on the situation. He squared his shoulders and stepped toward the tall man in the suit, like he was just another angry parent. "Sir, I'm going to need you to step back from the scene." That's when Malcolm James slowly pulled out a small black leather wallet. Not his full DOJ badge, not the shiny federal bling, but a slim personal ID with just one name and one title. The kind of ID that whispered instead of screamed. He held it up between two fingers, like a dagger made of truth. "I'm Malcolm James," he said, voice low and razor sharp. "You just put your hands on my daughter." And boom, the temperature shifted like someone yanked the sun out of the sky. Officer Hale blinked. His partner, Officer Maddox, turned halfway toward the radio clipped to his vest, hand hovering. "Don't," Malcolm said, not louder, just final. "Don't bother. You're already being recorded by 3 federal surveillance feeds, and in about 4 minutes, you're going to be surrounded." You could hear the panic start leaking out of their confidence. From behind Malcolm, the 2 agents subtly adjusted their stances. Black earpieces, mirrored shades, Secret Service posture without the labels. They weren't muscle. They were chess masters in Kevlar, and they'd just activated the next move. Across the street, 2 unmarked black SUVs had parked at opposite corners. One person leaned out a window, holding a phone to their ear. Another had a camera, already aimed at the cops, documenting everything like they were live streaming a takedown. The officers shifted nervously, scanning the street. You could tell the math was hitting their brains. This wasn't a routine stop, this was a career killer. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," Maddox mumbled, backing off like the air had suddenly gotten heavier. "No," Malcolm replied, turning his head slightly. "You knew what you were doing. You saw a black kid in a hoodie and made her a threat. You didn't even ask her name before you put her in cuffs." Ayanna was off to the side now, her hands still red from the cuffs. One of the agents had knelt beside her, shielding her from the eyes, whispering something calm and low as she tried not to cry. The crowd was growing, fast. People from the neighborhood were stepping closer, phones out, whispering to each other. "Yo, is that who I think it is?" "That's the Attorney General, bro. That's his kid." One woman, a teacher from the middle school down the block, had already gone live on Instagram. Camera zoomed in on the officers' faces. Charleston PD just detained the Attorney General's daughter outside her school. She narrated like a seasoned anchor. And now it's all being recorded. You cannot make this up. Officer Hale looked pale. He glanced at his partner like he was about to whisper, "We messed up," but Malcolm was already speaking again. "You have 2 options," he said, folding his ID away. "You can stand here and wait for federal oversight to explain just how deep you've dug yourselves. Or you can start cooperating now. And maybe, salvage whatever's left of your future in law enforcement." Maddox looked ready to melt into the sidewalk. "We weren't trying to. We didn't know who she was." Malcolm's eyes didn't even blink. "You didn't ask." And just like that, the first black SUV opened. 3 more agents stepped out, each one with the expression of someone who wasn't here for conversation. The street filled with tension so thick it was basically fog. The media showed up next. Local reporters who heard the scanners hopped the curb and aimed their cameras straight at the growing standoff. Microphones, press badges. The words breaking story already on their lips. A mistake had been made, and now it was going nuclear. The precinct felt like a pressure cooker on the verge of blowing its lid. Phones ringing non-stop, whispers ricocheting off concrete walls. Command staff pretending they weren't, all sweating through their pressed uniforms. Behind closed doors, Chief Roland Keller stood in his office, trying to strategize damage control while staring down the barrel of the worst PR disaster the department had seen in years. And maybe the last one it'd survive. But this wasn't just bad press. This was Malcolm James, and Keller knew exactly who that name belonged to. The man now sitting in their station wasn't just a pissed-off father. He was the damn Attorney General of the United States. Not only that, he was the architect of the current federal policing reform initiative. The guy in charge of rewriting how law enforcement was supposed to function in communities like this one. And now, he wasn't walking in with memos or policy. He was walking in with rage, bottled, precise, and backed by every inch of his title. Malcolm sat in a private conference room, Ayanna beside him, her knees bouncing slightly, a silent war going on behind her eyes. She hadn't said a word since they got inside, just clutched the edge of her hoodie and blinked hard, refusing to let a single tear fall in front of strangers. The agent, standing by the door, nodded once to Malcolm, then stepped out, giving them a moment. That's when Internal Affairs Commander Naomi Grant walked in. Sharp suit, clipboard in hand, eyes already flicking through a storm of questions. She opened her mouth to speak, to say something official, something neutral, something safe. But Malcolm didn't let her get a word in. "You think I'm mad because they touched my child?" he said quietly, eyes locked on hers like a predator clocking movement. "I'm mad because she's not the first." Grant froze. The air in the room thickened instantly. "I've been reviewing data on probable cause stops across metro departments for 2 years," Malcolm continued. "You know what the pattern looks like." He didn't wait for her answer. "It looks like Ayanna, black, underage, walking home, no weapon, no threat, just presence." He reached into his briefcase and tossed a slim folder across the table. It landed with a slap that made Ayanna flinch. "I want body cam footage from today. Unedited, time-stamped. I want every complaint filed on Officers Hale and Maddox, including the ones you didn't act on. And I want every single probable cause stop on black minors in the last 12 months from this precinct. Names, locations, justification, officer reports, dashcam if you have it." Grant's voice came out a little shakier than she intended. "That's a lot of data to pull on short notice." Malcolm's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Then you'd better start yesterday." Chief Keller walked in at that exact moment, trying to paste some authority on top of his panic. "Mr. James, I want to apologize." "I don't want your apology," Malcolm cut in like a blade. "I want your systems. I want your numbers. I want your rot exposed." Keller swallowed hard. "This is all just happening fast. If we could get ahead of the narrative." "There is no narrative," Malcolm snapped, rising slowly from his chair. "There's just truth. And whether you hand it to me or I subpoena it in front of a national audience, it's coming out." Ayanna looked up at her father then, not just as her protector, but as a man holding an entire institution by the throat. Grant tried one last angle. "With respect, Mr. James, there are protocols." Malcolm leaned in, voice now ice. "I am the protocol." And with that, he turned to Ayanna, held out a hand, and she stood. Keller watched as the man who could rewrite the future of American policing walked out of his station like he owned the building. Because in that moment, he kind of did. You ever see a lie unravel in real time? It starts with one thread, a single pull, and suddenly, the whole damn sweater's coming apart in your hands. That's exactly what happened in the days following Ayanna's wrongful detainment. But it wasn't just about her anymore. That was just the spark. What came next? That was the explosion. The FOIA request dropped first. Some junior journalist at a local paper filed it out of curiosity, trying to get ahead of the story, maybe catch a quote before national media swallowed the whole thing. But what they got back wasn't a quote. It was a receipt. One of the arresting officers, Hale, had 6 prior complaints. Not 1, not 2, 6. Excessive force, profiling. One involved a black teen handcuffed and left in the rain for over an hour. Another involved a woman slammed against her own car because Hale thought she looked out of place. And here's the kicker. Every single complaint was investigated internally and mysteriously closed. Not enough evidence. Witness unreliable. Officer within procedure. Buried like bones. The story should have ended there, right? Internal discipline. PR shuffle. Officer placed on administrative leave. That's the playbook. But the internet wasn't playing games this time, because someone on the inside leaked screenshots. And not just to any reporter. They leaked them to a non-profit watchdog account with a following the size of a city. The screenshots were from an internal group chat between officers, a private thread, unofficial, unmonitored. Just the boys blowing off steam. Except the steam was memes of lynchings, jokes about feral teens in hoodies, images mocking protesters, judges, and one particular AG who needs to be reminded who runs the streets. The language wasn't dog whistles. It was straight up sirens. And right there in the thread, Officer Maddox, laughing along, posting GIFs, tagging his buddies. When that hit the timeline, it was over. News anchors were interrupting live broadcasts to drop the updates. Hashtags exploded. National papers moved the story from page 5 to page 1. By midnight, the Department of Justice had opened a formal civil rights investigation into the entire Charleston Metro Police Department. The union panicked, went full spin mode. Out of context. Jokes among friends. Due process. But no one was buying it, not anymore. Especially not when a former precinct sergeant, retired 6 months, dropped a letter through his lawyer. A 10-page whistleblower statement detailing a decade of internal rot, fabricated reports, deleted footage, retaliation against officers who spoke up. And through all this, Malcolm James stayed silent. No cameras, no podiums, no viral sound bites. Just a room downtown, quiet, clinical, dead serious. Where hearings began, not with shouting but with receipts. One by one, witnesses walked in. Civil rights attorneys, activists, even former cops who were done protecting the illusion. They brought files, emails, dash cam clips that somehow never made it to evidence lockers, notes from cases dismissed too easily, probable cause forms that looked copy-pasted, patterns, habits, names. Malcolm sat at the head of that long table, like a conductor in a courtroom without a gavel. And every new piece of evidence, another brick in the wall collapsing behind them. This wasn't about Ayanna anymore. She'd become the face of something much older, deeper, and uglier. A system that had learned to hide in plain sight, but now it was being dragged out, piece by piece. And for the first time in a long time, that system wasn't just afraid of public outrage. It was afraid of paperwork. The storm always hits hardest after the first wave of truth. Once the evidence started stacking up, once the threads were yanked and the system started twitching, that's when the knives came out. Not in court, not on paper, but in public. The threats began quietly at first. A blocked number leaving voicemails that said nothing but breathed too hard. A letter slipped into Ayanna's locker at school, with the words, "Stay quiet," scratched across the front. Then came the digital poison. Memes calling her a liar, a crisis actor, a puppet. An entire Reddit thread popped up overnight, accusing Malcolm of weaponizing fatherhood for political gain. And then Fox News got hold of it. "Is this truly about justice?" one host asked smugly. "Or is Malcolm James just another radical bureaucrat using his child to push a woke agenda?" Boom, headlines. Pundits foaming at the mouth, clips out of context. The words "activist AG" slapped on every chyron like a warning label. Ayanna's school inbox was flooded with anonymous hate. Her social feeds, once filled with book recs and dumb memes with her friends, now packed with death threats, slurs, and Photoshop jobs of her face, pasted onto mugshots she'd never seen. She stopped smiling in the mornings. Malcolm saw it. He watched the girl who used to sing to herself while brushing her teeth start closing her bedroom door and speaking in whispers. It killed him. The silence, the shrinking. But he didn't flinch. He leaned in. "If you're more upset about a black father protecting his daughter than about cops handcuffing a child for a walking home," he said during a late-night interview, his voice calm but shaking the damn air, "then you're the problem." The quote went viral before breakfast. By the end of that week, a televised Senate oversight hearing was scheduled. National, live, mandatory viewing across every government agency with a badge and a budget. Malcolm James took his seat in front of the committee like a man with no time for theater, no theatrics, no tie adjustment. Just fire in his bones and receipts in his folder. He didn't begin with a speech. He began with a prop. Malcolm held up Ayanna's school ID, still slightly cracked in the corner, still featuring her 9th grade grin and a pair of neat, bright braids. "This," he said, holding it in the air for the camera, "is who they feared." He let the silence sink in like cement. A child in braids, with books in her bag and headphones in her ears. And for that, she got put in handcuffs. A senator shifted awkwardly. Another cleared his throat. But no one interrupted, because there was nothing to say. Nothing that wouldn't sound hollow next to the truth of that plastic rectangle in his hand. Malcolm continued. "They didn't ask her name. They didn't call her parents. They didn't see a student, a daughter, a citizen. They saw a threat. And that tells me everything I need to know about the rot we still haven't dug out of this country's policing. Cameras clicked, flashbulbs burst. Ayanna watched from backstage, her mother holding her hand, tears silently tracing both their cheeks. This wasn't just a defense, it was a war cry. And Malcolm? He wasn't asking for justice anymore. He was demanding it. 2 months. That's how long it took to turn a traffic stop into a tectonic shift. The 2 officers who cuffed Ayanna, gone. One resigned under pressure before Internal Affairs could even finish typing up their findings. The other, Hale, wasn't so lucky. He's facing a federal indictment now. Civil rights violations, evidence tampering, conspiracy. His mugshot? Ironically, plastered all over the same internet that once protected him. But the story didn't end with a perp walk. It grew. The Department of Justice announced a brand new task force focused on nationwide accountability in policing. And at the top of that memo, in bold print, sat a name that silenced the room: the Ayanna James Initiative. Not just a title, a reckoning. A reminder that the smallest spark, if struck at the right moment, could set the whole system ablaze. Reporters kept asking Malcolm for a quote, for a comment, for a victory lap. He gave them only this: "This isn't a win. This is justice playing catch-up, and it's still behind." No podium, no soundbite, just truth. Ayanna, though, she had something to say now. The girl who once flinched at a shadow now stood in front of her entire high school auditorium, mic in hand, heart pounding so loud it could have been heard over the speakers. The assembly was packed. Cameras lined the back wall, principal fidgeting at the podium. But Ayanna, she stood still, and then she spoke. "When those officers put their hands on me, they didn't just put me in cuffs. They put me in a box. The kind they've put so many black kids in. A box where we don't get to explain. We don't get to be scared. We just get judged." She paused, took a breath, scanned the sea of faces, classmates, teachers, strangers who'd seen her name, but never seen her. "I'm lucky," she continued. "Not because it didn't happen, but because people believed me. Because of who my father is. But you shouldn't have to be the daughter of the Attorney General to be believed." The room went still, and then applause, real, raw, rising like thunder from a generation tired of waiting for someone else to say the quiet parts out loud. Back of the room, leaning against the wall in a worn suit and heavier heart, stood Malcolm James. He didn't cry, but his jaw clenched the way it does when a man is trying not to. His hands stayed tucked in his pockets, but his eyes, tired, unblinking, locked on his daughter like she'd just reshaped the world with a single sentence. And in a way she had, because that's the thing about power. It can be a weapon, a muzzle, a wall, or it can be a megaphone. And that day, the world heard Ayanna James loud and clear. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something burning,